Yes. All right, there we are. The meeting will now come to order. This is the Athens Shade Tree Commission meeting of June 14th, 2007. And the first order of business is the reading and approval of the minutes of our May 10th, 2007 meeting. So we will have a moment of silence here while we go through the reading of the minutes. I think there's a small thing on the summit at Coates Run in the Athens City Code. The A is a capital A.
Okay.
So it's ACC 37.04A.
Oh, yeah.
Are there any corrections, additions, amendments to the minutes? The last two pages are the addendum that went to the University Estates Grand Vista Village for your reference. So you don't have to read all 4 pages.
I move we accept them. If you...
Move that the minutes be accepted. A second?
I second.
Emily seconds. All those in favor, aye.
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 Thank you. Minutes are approved and accepted. The first order of business is we have 2 tree permits, and I don't know that we have much information on either one of them at this point. Ann Bonner, I think, well, actually, we do on 510 Richland Avenue. Yeah, 4 Banbury.
She sent out an email saying that she looked at it and it was in the right way and dying, but it was such a small tree that the owner may want to deal with himself or use it for firewood. Remember that? There was an email that went back and forth on that.
Yes, okay, it's the Liberty Elm from about 12 years ago, maybe. Yeah.
And actually, it's one of my bosses. I work for Calvin James.
Then you would remember this well.
Well, he approached me to ask what the deal is on it. He doesn't have a fireplace, so he's not interested in cutting it down. He wants to know if the city wants to cut it down. It's not that big as far as I understand from what Ann said, but...
Yeah, and Ann even, as I do now recall, she suggested if it were possible that the city might take it down, that Ron Lucas's crew and his crew might be able to do it.
No power lines by it, too, I think was the other
Yeah,
statement.
it's critical. Yeah, otherwise you need somebody with...
We'll refer that to Ron then.
Okay.
Yes, and Ron will contact, we'll ask him to
Calvin
contact
James.
Calvin James.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other one is there are several ash trees, perhaps 5 or 6 in front of 510 Richland Avenue, an apartment building owned by Glenn Knudsen, and 2 of the ash trees are in serious decline. And Ann looked at those and said that it does not appear to be emerald ash borer. She's asked some other people to come and look at it, but she thought perhaps that the sloping site and this really rough spring and winter might have done them in. They're pretty stressed to begin with. So those, she says, should be taken down. And the question was, are they really truly in the right-of-way? So we'll ask Ron to make sure of this. If they are, those may be too big for Ron to handle, which means then we would have to ask a contractor to be hired for that. I'm sorry. Steve, did you have something on this?
Just a comment on 510 Richland Avenue.
Is that in the right-of-way? Are those trees?
Right now, the street director, Andy Stone, and I, and Ron Lucas, have met to come up with some job assignments for an employee of the city who half of his pay comes out of streets, half comes out of code. That particular individual also is experienced in surveying. He's not a registered surveyor, but he knows how to survey. And Ron uses them, and Ron and Andy use them quite a bit for survey work. And I had, after a discussion with those two and looking at this individual's job description, I'd made a recommendation that possibly he could be employed by the tree commission to determine these things, because code officers just use best available data that they have, where this other employee has a little more experience. And I'd recommended that possibly he be the one to go out and look at this as the first project working for the tree commission. I'd hoped Ron would be here to ask him if it had been accomplished yet or not, but I can find out. If it hasn't been done, could that employee go out actually and do it?
That would be wonderful to have somebody with that kind of experience doing it.
Right, because
Leave code a little bit.
this particular individual is very good about doing research at the courthouse, knowing where different surveys are available, and that's the only real way with a survey to know if these trees are on or off. If not, code officers are just using the best information that they have to make as educated a determination as possible.
Okay.
So I'll find out from Ron if it's actually been accomplished yet.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That would be real improvement for good information. Okay, the next item is, let's see, I think there were no other tree permits that were current. City tree issues, there is a question that Ann Bonner had about West State Street ball fields tree protections, and she's not here. We will just leave it for Ann to address at a later time. The other thing is West State Street ball fields tree planting and non-planting zones, which we're going to work on, and under the guidance of Nick Carr on the amount of infrastructure that's out there in the West State Street ball fields. There is some interesting infrastructure there.
And that's a meeting.
And this is a meeting, and this is tomorrow morning. David, would you like to say something about this and maybe pass out the...
Yeah, I
goodies?
contacted Nick, and we've arranged to meet at his office at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning so that anyone who's available
Okay.
welcome to come along. What I've got here is satellite images of the West State Street fields that we can take with us tomorrow to see where we are. You can see the ball fields, those are the big white circles. There's the semicircle towards the bottom where I think they're white pines after discussing it with Alvy as to what those are. And you can just about see the area that's used as a allotment planting,
Community garden?
Community gardens up towards the upper right-hand corner.
Below this must be the bike path we're looking at right
it's the
here.
bike
So
path.
it's between the bike path and
Yeah.
this area here. So.
Yes. And so tomorrow we want to try and figure out where the utilities are so that we don't plant anywhere near them.
Okay.
And then we'll have to get with probably Kevin to get approval to plant any trees anywhere else.
Yes.
The first step is to figure out where Nick has got utilities that he's concerned about, so we can rule those areas out and address any concerns he's got about existing trees.
Kevin was very helpful with the protection of the trees that Ann was concerned about. He moved barriers in place right away to keep people from driving across roots of these white pines in a straight line here.
And the anticipation eventually is that we're going to be getting some trees from Art. Is this like for storage?
If we can
purposes?
find the space, then what we'd like to do is plant those trees that Art's got down here so we can use it as essentially as a nursery to grow these trees on. So they could then be, when they're a reasonable size, be planted elsewhere in the city. That's the idea.
Grow your own trees. so
Grow
to
your
speak.
own trees.
Okay.
Art has trees that these graduate students have grown, and he would like to find homes for them. So,
Okay.
Okay, are there any questions? Okay, folks should just come.
Yeah, and that's at 30 Curran.
Yeah.
So that's going to meet at his office really rather
yeah,
than the ballpark.
we arranged to meet at his office and then go on from his office to drive around the site
Okay.
and see what's there.
All right. The next item, this is something that came up at a small committee meeting. On the bike path, there are trees that have paper protecting their trunks, and that needs to be removed. And thank you, Commissioner Gregg. So that is something.
A number were removed from Kroger's down almost to the end of the current, where the bike path ends. When I was on a trash pickup, First Presbyterian Church group, we removed the paper. I won't say around each and every one, but we were trying to hit all of them.
Very good. So it's been reduced somewhat, the amount of work to be done.
Dramatically, if not
Yeah.
completely.
Okay. Well, there might be a little more volunteer activity. Meanwhile, we'll alert Ron
Yeah.
Lucas.
We were concerned about the encasing and the trees, that was on the south side, about the plastic containers or rubber containers around, the rings around the trees. It looked like that some of the trees were suffering from damage because those rings are still on.
Okay. So remove rings. Okay. Thank you. Another item that we will run by Ron Lucas also is, we've asked him actually, to start compiling a fall planting list from the data we have from previous tree permits and minutes of meetings, but there really hasn't been much of a list compilation going on for a while, and we have some suggested sites. On Woodside Drive, this was a subject that came up, there is an area at the very end of Woodside toward, let's see, that would be McGuffey, that has a huge grove of ash. So if we lose that grove, that would be a place where it might behoove us to start planting a couple of things in advance of tree loss. And then there's been a dramatic loss of trees at what would be the western end of Woodside. And so that would be perhaps one place to start with a couple of site suggestions. And so we will start compiling our list. Our plantings are usually done in late November or December. And so we will have to get our list in order by early October in order to get it out.
And this is an opportunity for people watching us, presumably, to contact us and ask if they could have a tree planted in front of their house or
Okay.
business.
In the right-of-way zone in front
the
of our
right-of-way,
house.
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So the place to contact would be through the mayor's office for the Shade Tree Commission. All right. Well, are there any other questions, comments on that? And the next order of business, item 4, is landscape ordinance issues. There's a small, let's see, 70 North Congress small parking lot, and Ann has looked at this, and I looked at this. And Steve, do you have any comments on the 70 North Congress? Yes, there you go.
When I received this proposal from one of my code enforcement officers, I said, oh, there's a section in the landscape ordinance that applies to this. The section that I thought was the retrofit section, 25% pavement replacement, 50% improvement to a building, new development. And I said there must be something in there about if you expand an existing parking lot. Well, come to find out, there isn't anything in there about it. So I might recommend that that be included in your ordinance, when
Somebody's
you actually
making
look
note
at
of
the
that.
ordinance.
Yeah.
Because this is an example of an instance where you have an expanded existing parking lot. So do you consider the expansion new and it has to be landscaped? Or should there be some consideration about, don't worry about landscaping unless you expand existing parking lots more than 25% or, whatever you might consider. Just because it wasn't exactly covered in the code, I recommended that it be considered new development. So, and that's why, very small, it's only addition, I think, of 4 parking spots to about a 20 or 30 car existing parking lot, very large, fairly large parking lot. So I just recommended that you review it and, make a determination that what they were doing was all right.
Folks may want to, we probably can't because most people haven't seen this spot, although Ann and I have. We will probably give a provisional comment on, on the parking lot at this point, but not perhaps approve this until everybody's had a chance to take a look. However, Ann's suggestion was to keep an old red bud that is behind the fence, behind the house, and you can see that in this picture. And then on the other side where there are no trees at this time on behind the fence near the house, would be an opportunity to plant perhaps 2 Norway spruce. She said they'd be tough. They could take the kind of site, and 5 to 6 foot trees would be appropriate for something that would stay out of the reach of vines and be able to get a good start. So the way to look at this site is to come to it off of Court Street. I did it wrong. One goes up North Court past Cornwell Jewelers and turn immediately between Cornwell Jewelers and the big apartment building that has bronies in it, and go due west. And it ends at this white fence, and that's where the extension of the parking lot will be. The green space would be eliminated. There's some funny metal struts in the ground where apparently at some time there had been a big billboard.
There was a billboard there.
Yeah, there was a billboard there someplace in the maybe 40s, 50s.
So this is between actually Cornwell Jewelers and Cornwell's apartment complex, the Courtside Pizza? or-
Except far
Yeah,
out.
that's how you get into it.
And then you just go
And
west.
the house is on Congress,
Okay.
so it's,
So it's almost all the way across the block, so to speak. Okay.
yeah, you've probably gone on a plat mat. You would have probably gone into the Congress side of the
And
plat
looked.
mat.
Yeah, okay.
It's accessed via an easement across those Court Street properties. You would think if you went there that it was part of that Court Street parking area for those businesses, but it's actually the rear yard of 70 Congress.
Good to think they don't need a buffer in between.
So,
Yeah, I guess we can be glad that there aren't any huge billboards downtown like that
Yeah.
anymore. Go take a look, and you'll see these little archaeological evidences. So we'll hold off on that until people have had a chance to look. If you agree with Ann's suggestions, email me,
Okay.
okay? And then we can notify the property owner. And you will have to sort of perch there on the walk in between the fence opening and look into the redbud.
Whereabouts did Anne suggest putting the 2 Norway spruce?
Is that behind this fence?
Yeah, behind this fence. So this would be the south east corner of the property, and going west from there.
Over here? If this is the
This is
tree.
the fence. Yes, so it would be here and here.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Oh, here and here? Oh.
Yeah, there's a parking, there's a
Sure.
driveway that comes in here.
Oh,
So
okay.
here's the redbud. Here's might be another
An
one.
existing tree?
Yeah, either here and here or here and here.
Okay.
Okay.
It's a tight lot. All right, so we have Mr. Valentour here, who is, has the landmark property, and since there isn't anybody here from Holster Clinic, I think perhaps we should do Mr. Valentour the courtesy of having him first, or Steve, is there a... Okay, would you like to come to the table and...
I think, do you have all the drawings here that,
The only thing you want to watch out for is
Rescue
like,
Wow, oh dear.
it's not so much the covering it up, it's also crashing.
I think you have all the drawings here, but I'd rather not set it maybe one side and look at them. The other one, it's just all the same. Yes, they are. Now, there's 2 parts to this project, obviously. I think the first one, which has the trees identified specifically, is at the landmark site itself, where the apartment building is going to be. Because of the number of people, apartments there, the Bob's Supermarket site also will be turned into a parking lot. And that's what that drawing represents right there.
This is this one has
That actually has a schedule on it for the plan that we got and the layout on the property. This one doesn't have a schedule yet, it just has what my interpretation of the code was in terms of what landscaping issues needed to be addressed at the Bob site, in terms of the setbacks and the number of trees. I will define this more as we go through and make sure it meets your approval in terms of the density and number of the amount of green space that's going to be incorporated into that parking lot, essentially, is what that's going to be.
Now, did you consider all of the trees indicated here to be large trees?
Yeah.
Big trees, okay.
Yep.
So you're
Just
on-
as is required by code,
So
yes.
we're on the same page.
Yes, absolutely. The only deviation, I think, that we have on here from the letter of the ordinance is that the property line between the old landmark site and the bowling alley and Donner's Laundry, I don't have trees planted along that property line because there's a massive amount of city utilities that run down through that section right now. There's a 60-inch storm tunnel, main water lines, and main sewer lines all are located in that area. So instead of planting trees along that property line, we planted smaller bushes and things. Monomus and hawthorn are listed over here.
Forsythia and viburnum, I think, is what you
Yeah.
had in mind. They're very
Well,
high maintenance.
If
Well,
you-
now, were you planning to have those come
Forsythia?
out over the, were you planning to have those shrubs come out over the parking lot?
No, I left enough room for them hopefully to be turned into that.
Okay, so that was our
I don't think you
concern.
want to prune that viburnum into a
Right.
4-foot area.
You know?
No. And forsythia is gonna take a lot of maintenance, a lot of pruning.
I've always found that they're pretty well wild.
Well, what they
Well-
do is the branches, when they touch the soil, then they start growing. And so you go from having shrubs to having a hedge.
Well, that's not a bad idea,
Well,
up against the
Well-
edge of that building.
but it
There-
won't necessarily be
That's what I
plainer.
There are some new varieties of forsythia that are more upright
Oh,
and
okay.
don't do that.
Okay.
But those get wider than 4 feet. Unless you want things that are overhanging the parking lot to a great extent, I think you need to rethink
Okay.
the shrub.
That's fine. This was all
Selections.
provided by Greenleaf Nursery out of Marietta. They did the
Okay.
actual planning for this, at my instruction as to what, you know,
Do we know what the depth of those utilities is?
Yeah, that's the next
I'm
question.
sorry?
What kind, depth of utilities and what kind of utilities?
they're all, yes, but I didn't bring all those drawings with me.
Well,
They're-
do you know offhand? I mean, you know.
Well, they're not that deep. They're probably, the storm sewer was an old creek that they actually just worked over. And I've run into it all along, all the way down to the river, you know, down in projects we've worked on over the years. And I believe it was like, gosh, I don't really know exactly, 6 feet. It varies depending on the terrain as you go down through here. Now, the water lines and the sewer lines are up a little higher.
So the water lines and sewer lines are above that.
Yes,
That's-
yeah, there's a tunnel down
Yeah,
there, 60-inch
there's a
tunnel
tunnel.
underneath all that stuff,
Okay.
yeah.
So
But
That's
you
all the
aren't-
way down the street here, all the way
You
down.
aren't sure what the depth of the soil.
I know that there's water lines and sewer lines above the storm line.
Yeah, but you don't know what the depth of soil for the roots of the shrubs that you're planting there would be.
Well, no, but we tried to make sure that they would not be of a nature that would interfere with, be a conflict in the future
Yeah.
with the utility lines.
So,
And that's,
go ahead.
go ahead. Oh, and that's a retaining wall as well? Or-
There's a little retaining wall along here
And
too.
is this the profile of the retaining wall that's, you're talking about? Or is that
Yes, but I think
something
it varies, no, that's right,
about 2.5 feet?
yeah.
Okay.
Well, the utilities are on this side of it,
Okay.
So
tried
is,
not to mess with them.
yeah.
Okay, I just, oh yeah, I
Yeah.
just wondered.
So is the idea that if they needed to get to the sewer or water line, they would take out a shrub
Yeah,
and then
be able to dig in.
do the work
Yeah.
and then hopefully?
The bowling alley, I think, is actually partially over the sewer line.
So they'll have to take out part of the bowling alley.
Look at the maps, it's
One
very
is being-
tight. That's why we try to keep our buildings away from that completely.
Mhm.
The grade, that retaining wall is, the whole site slopes this way,
Mm.
across this way. So the retaining wall's higher here, and it gets to go just to zero,
Okay.
about right here. So that there's no retaining wall for the majority of the length of that property line.
Okay.
It's only getting off of Kurt Street that we go down, because we want to keep these buildings relatively related to the street at
Mhm.
Kurt, so we have to get underneath them, parking.
How close are you to the limit on the parking spaces on this property?
We're within 3.
Well, because
Barely
we
exact.
really
It's
would
pretty
like
close.
to get some trees down here, and one possibility.
Along that
it would-
side?
It would mean you sacrificing a parking spot or two.
So I've
on
got
here.
trees here now. I've got them coming down
Where,
Oh, at the
Down here.
beginning.
At the
yeah,
beginning.
you've got
that's
4 at the
clear.
beginning there.
Yeah, and that would relate to
Here.
the other drawing, because that is property owned by both. That represents right then through here.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's a
No,
good start.
The concern was that you've got a very long strip here with almost nothing to mark the shrubs.
Well,
and we
if you've
wanted-
been over there and looked at it, I mean, this is a building right on the property line. Bowling alley.
Yeah, but that stops about there. That's,
Yeah, but the other possibility is
Bull-
to have
building stops right here.
islands, to have an island instead of a lane, or more than one, so that you've got, a tree could be planted there.
I can afford 2.
The,
I think I've got, I mean, in terms of the parking spots that I've got outlined right now, I need 255, and I believe I got 258. 7.
the other query I think was also about trees down at this end.
Yeah.
It didn't appear that these were large shade trees at the end here, and that might be another place where you could put in large shade trees and help us bring up the numbers.
Yeah,
That's
the
that
dog-
smaller ones right
yeah,
there now.
instead of the dogwood.
Instead of putting the bigger trees there?
Yeah,
I
just,
have my notebook, because I know, last time I met much informally with you guys, I just took notes and.
Sure.
yeah. I've got, let's see, I also have these notes from,
As well.
yeah, you may as well make yourself comfortable.
No,
The one near your suitcase is not up.
Oopsie, sorry. Oh, I didn't carry enough of those.
Dogwoods at Palmer. Out.
Oh, yeah.
because they're actually not going to, probably not going to survive in that sort of spot anyway.
Yeah.
Much
Okay.
better to get some shade trees.
You know, I try to assume that these fellas know what they're doing. When
Yeah.
they specify the type of trees,
They're not going to have to maintain it.
you know,
And sometimes they're thinking more about appearance in the early years rather than long-term.
Right.
and that's what's really important.
Yes.
Yeah, you want something,
Appearance on planting, I've noticed, is something that's of great concern to a lot of,
Well,
I mean,
and I, believe me, I think in the long term, I mean, because in my opinion, one thing that, when I first met my wife, she lived out at Plains in Cardinal Village out there. Very simple buildings, but they spent a whole lot of money on landscaping. They were beautiful.
yeah. They have, yeah, Cardinal has a real policy about landscaping.
I thought, I mean,
It's a very
for a
interesting one.
simple structure and very simple,
It makes an
the landscaping
enormous-
makes the building, and they were rather mature at the time that I was, had grown in. They were very attractive.
So, all right, well, let's see, there were a couple of dogwoods out here, weren't there? And
Yeah.
There was
so-
nothing on that island, I think.
And there's an empty island here.
I'm sorry?
There's an island, it
Yeah,
has
right
an,
there.
what is,
That's sort of on, yeah, I mean, that's on the right of way. I suppose we could plant it
We
there.
can give
You-
you permission to plant there.
you can plant it, that's right.
right.
We want to
We
help
like
you
trees.
meet the requirement.
What this can do then is reduce the need to plant trees down
That's
to
fine
that
with
soil
me.
like this. I mean,
I'm
that's
gonna
the,
keep this one here.
This is called consolidation.
yes.
We have
Tree
buzzwords
commission
for it.
being flexible.
Yeah.
I
So,
could, well,
so all
almost
these,
get out here too.
yeah. So there's
Grass
1,
up.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spots where there might be large shade trees out here.
Instead of dogwood, you mean? Is that what
Yeah.
you're
I think-
Well, and plus the street.
Grass.
Are those
Yeah, and
6
then
or
the- and then
5,
island that's,
5 spots?
This thing here is
Three,
just a grassy island at the moment. It's in the right
four.
place, so we can give him permission.
Because
to
this should just be one,
jump
right?
around away.
1, 2, 3,
Involved in this.
4,
Yeah, and the question
5.
arises,
Yeah,
what's you
but
gonna
there's
put there
space
that's
here.
gonna get in the way of
Oh, you think
the
there could be
traffic,
two
but
there?
at the same time,
Mr.
you also think it's gonna be
Valentour?
big
Well,
enough
I'd
to-
rather have a big tree than shrubs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cheaper.
But you can't see around a
If
shrub.
you
Yeah.
plant
That's
a
true.
tree that's clear of branches of 6 feet, it won't be a problem.
Will it survive Palmerfest?
Pardon me?
Will it survive Palmerfest?
You'll defend it.
Just asking.
Mr. Valentour, there's a spot right here that has a symbol with a 1 in it. That might also be a tree planting site, or is that a,
That's a seed mulch.
It's a what?
That
See,
means seed and mulch.
the code on the top
okay.
here, so
Ah,
remember
you're
we're
right.
looking at this up,
So you-
Okay, but could we
Those are
have
grassy
two?
areas.
Could
So
we have
this
two
is
trees
more
there?
trees. You could put,
Well, how many trees can I get in there?
How far apart is that?
let's see, this is, if 1 inch is 30
That's
feet,
not even a 30 feet. Well, I mean, maybe from way out here, I believe that circle though is a pole, probably a utility pole
Mm.
at the street, at the
Oh.
very corner.
Well,
New pole light on concrete base.
okay.
Yeah, we don't have an
Thank
idea
you.
where the power lines are, do we?
what
The
kind of
power
pole is
that
it?
goes all the way around the site, both sides too,
Mm.
yeah.
Power
That's
lines
okay.
or
We're okay with
buried?
power.
Okay, just in terms of trees and power lines.
Oh, they're all gonna be underground. Everything here's underground.
Good.
Yay, yay.
Well done, well done. Okay.
We'll get this development by development.
One step
Yes.
at a time.
What?
Yeah, one step at a time.
Right.
So, let's see. There was, the big problem was that there just weren't enough shade trees in the plan from what we could see.
Okay.
And medium size is not what we want. It's shade parking lots, they're 40
We
to
were
45
looking
feet
at,
above.
For most of the trees here, the maples were 2.5 to 3 inch. Scarlet oaks were 2.5 to 3 inch. Too low.
No, we mean their size at maturity,
Oh.
how big they
Oh,
get.
okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, yeah.
Things, well,
In
we've
the
actually
future.
just eliminated the dogwoods, but there are some hawthorns and magnolias here which aren't really shade trees.
And Mungo pine too, isn't that a bush?
Right, yeah,
That's a bush.
That's a bush.
We wouldn't even think about that.
Oh,
So
Decorative,
it's,
but,
all we would count are the first three, the red maple, the scarlet oak and the black. It's,
We put the magnolias right here in front. 8 of them.
Mm.
those, but they're
where are the magnolias?
on Kurt Street.
Yeah,
They're
It's
groups of 4.
Yeah, it's,
So
Well,
that
this
distance
is-
there is what, about 10, 15 feet maybe? Less than 15.
Yeah.
and this is the,
It's a
where's
sidewalk.
north?
North's over here. This is the,
Over on the west.
this is the west side.
Yeah, so this is the side that needs shade the most.
Sounds nice.
There's some oaks beside there.
There's the oaks.
There's two of them. That would be one there.
We're trying to leave this inner thing here without a whole lot of trees. So it's more of a grassy.
Frisbee land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make a containment trees, so it's a contained space,
Mhm.
sort of.
How high do we think those magnolias will actually grow?
Is that magnolia stellata?
It's saucer
No,
magnolia.
saucer
Oh.
magnolia Soulangia.
They can eventually get fairly large.
Because one possibility is being so close to the building, we could allow 2 for 1.
Something large, you mean, as
Yeah, in
replacement?
other words, we would allow 2 of those to be equivalent to 1 shade tree.
do those bloom later?
No,
Okay.
well, there's some new cultivars that do,
Mhm.
but the species is the one that blooms early and is often killed by frost. That's what we have at the end of our lot. And ours are about 50 years old, and, well, the one we lost a couple of years ago was, but they're fairly large trees, not quite like a
Yeah.
maple
They're
or
listed
an oak.
here,
No,
but
yeah,
it's-
but they're definitely
it's
not
12
like a regular
It's
shade
12 to
tree.
18 feet, so 18 feet you think then is certainly achievable for these things.
Well, ours, I think, are taller than that, and the top has been trimmed back a little bit by the power company, too.
Mhm. But it's still definitely more like
How
a
high is the
medium.
building at this?
Yes.
30 feet. 30 feet.
Oh, okay.
It's 2
Yeah,
stories, 3
if we
stories.
had regular shade trees, then you'd get more cooling effect on that side of the building too.
So you want bigger trees there? I mean, I'd have to
Uh,
move them out closer to the property line, probably, so they'd have room.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we would prefer that those be, all four would be shade trees.
Do you have recommendations?
Since he already has oaks,
Just two
We
of
got
them.
maples and oaks,
And
I got
red
two, I
maples
could
and
make the
oaks.
whole oaks along that front there.
Well,
And move these two up and make it all like a street front.
I think they talk about mixing all the time.
Like
Yes,
that.
Well,
another suggestion is not to use too much of one species.
But in
Yeah.
fact,
You
see,
probably have heard of the emerald ash borer that is probably going to wipe out all of our ash trees.
Yeah.
And areas where they've planted all ash will be completely bare.
yeah, Mr. Knudsen's apartment at 510 has 5 or 6 going to be dead ash
It's
trees
like
in front of it.
poplars, two of them.
And-
Yeah.
Tall, thin,
Yeah.
They all died.
We're trying
But
not to
there
think
are-
too much
there are
about
only
sudden
two-
oak death, but
Two oak trees there at the moment, so, I mean, it wouldn't be that many oak trees, they would all be along the same side, so the risk is you could lose them at the same time. I think oak trees would be a reasonable thing to put along that.
Okay, I don't think that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I always like the streetscape to have some kind of rhythm to it.
Yeah.
And as I said, the risk is you could lose the whole lot in one go if one disease went through.
But you have a lot of other,
Yeah.
you do have a mixture of maple
Yeah.
and oak and black gum. So are there any other suggestions for Mr. Valentour? And we'll have some,
You know, the one problem I have with trees along, I don't have any parking spots along here.
No.
You know, the first spot I have is out here by the dumpster pad.
Well, that's
This is the
what,
back of the Vassar Laundry. I mean, it's really not a,
well, that's why
I'd rather focus on the other sides than
Well,
that.
that's why we've encouraged you to plant trees over here,
Well,
because
I'll
that,
do, I mean,
because-
that and over here, I
because
think,
that
these are the
can-
residential neighborhoods.
because that can begin to compensate.
You
the
know,
fact that
and
you're
this,
not-
especially this side here with the senior citizen. it's really-
yeah, that might be a place to
Yeah,
plant
worry about
trees and shrubs together so that you have
We do
a
a
total
layering
screen.
effect here to try to buffer that. We have, like, as Brian indicated, we try to put as small as profile as possible onto Church Street, so it'll fit in terms of the structure when you're looking down the street. Yeah, but, you know, obviously a lot deeper
Yeah.
than the residential houses that are opposite the senior center. But it's not gonna put forth an image off of Church Street. And especially if I plant a row of oak trees here, it's gonna buffer that even better.
Yeah, yeah.
There could be some shrubs across it. Yeah, Troxel needs to drive in here though, so I have to leave a lane for him to be able to get his fire truck.
Yeah,
out.
just in
Yeah.
case.
Yes.
yeah.
Sure.
Makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, well, I think we would counsel that on the Heritage Commons side, that you do as much screening as you
Yeah,
can with
that's a good
shrubs and
idea.
trees.
Absolutely.
So,
And our other concern was these hawthorns down here. We would like, again, those to be larger shade trees if possible.
Now, I don't know if you've seen what's happened down here, but I think that Tony Farian had gotten a variance. He's built buildings right up against the property line down here.
That's that garage you
Yeah,
did,
and
right?
I always get in trouble when I put leaves on somebody else's roof.
He shouldn't have built so close to the property
He
line.
doesn't have permission to do it. I mean, that's why we try to keep these, well, dense, but not so huge,
Yeah.
at that elevation there, so we wouldn't have the neighbors be complaining about all the leaves and stuff popping into their yard.
Well, this is the east side. That's
Here-
not quite
here are
as
the
critical.
backyards
But
of people off of Oak Street or off of Church Street. That the houses are here and here.
what do you think?
It sounds reasonable because he's right. It's something, you know, they really are that close.
Yeah,
It's really a nuisance.
What is there now?
Buildings.
just,
Okay, no landscaping.
No, not on the other side.
so he's
building
doing
right
He was given
against
permission to
the
build
road.
within the
Okay.
footprint of an old garage.
so will how much light will there be?
Not very much in that.
Well, it is,
So if you have a shade tree, then it can get up, but if you've
But
got.
I'm worried about what happens. It dumps everything all over the other roofs. And we tried to, I don't know how big these guys get, but we tried to keep them a little bit smaller than
so the other way to do it is to put prestigious trees in there. That's column trees.
But they still would get up and the leaves would
Yeah.
go off
Yeah,
the roof.
sure.
I don't think that would help that problem.
Yeah, well, this has more of a hedge like, they're lower, and so it has
Yes.
some.
Again, you know, this elevation doesn't concern me as much as the ones that are actually, ones you've focused on so far, which are the streetscapes and where it's open. This is backyards. It's not,
We
it's not gonna be
also,
seen by anybody.
we
except
also are
backyards.
concerned about getting shade on pavement to
Right.
reduce heat
Yeah.
buildup.
And
No,
roofs
that's what
and
we're doing now.
cooling effect, yeah.
Well,
There's no pavement back here. This is grass.
Okay.
I get a
Okay.
sense that,
It can
yeah,
grow.
yeah, with any luck at all.
I guess one of my concerns is the precedent, because people have wanted us to cut down their trees. And the bottom line was they didn't want to rake leaves. You know, so we could say, okay, well, leaves on lawn you can cope with, but leaves on roof, well, and
Well,
I'm
but
not
then, you know,
saying
I don't
right.
think I'm required. I mean, this is not adjacent to a parking lot or anything.
No, but
No.
all the way around
It's-
the property, you're supposed to have an 8-foot wide perimeter.
With a shade tree
Shade
every
trees
30 feet.
30 feet.
Or two small trees every
Right, right,
15,
right,
so.
right.
Boxes here anyway.
Right,
These are-
so that would, well, the
So-
hawthorn trees are certainly attractive
Yeah.
and
Yes.
they certainly discourage people damaging them so much.
Yeah.
Should they be closer together and more of them?
As Hawthorne tree?
So how far, well, they are closer than the others, right?
Yeah, it's
These are closer
They're-
together.
What
twice
is
as
the
dense.
distance?
15 feet apart.
Okay.
Okay,
That's
that's
fine.
right,
That's fine.
okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
so
right.
I think those hawthorns
Right.
look swell there.
Right.
Okay.
Hawthorns are good.
You passed that one.
Good tree, and you
Good
did
choice,
it every
right?
15 feet. That's perfect.
You don't have to change a thing there. Okay, you want to look at the next
Now,
one?
I haven't identified any trees here at all on this.
Mhm.
Um,
So we should probably start with where they should be
I've got an idea.
and how many, yeah. So how many are within the parking lot itself?
8
Mhm.
trees there.
And how many spaces? How many,
And this?
I mean, how many
130,
spaces apart?
51 parking spots total.
So you have a large shade tree every 30 feet all around the perimeter.
Yep, well, except for here where it joins.
That's a driveway,
They're-
isn't it?
It's the same property.
Ah, gotcha. And there are one or two trees on each traffic.
Now, which trees on
Oh,
here,
there's
like
two.
the trees on that original, on that drive over there? Because you've got,
None.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. These here will be pushed in a little bit.
they'll be on, okay, you see, I hadn't actually, oh, that's fine.
Now, the one thing we did here is there's 2 entrances to Bob's
Yeah.
that we're abandoning out on
Oh,
the
okay.
Stimson Avenue
Mhm,
towards
mhm.
towards Date Street.
Mhm.
We're just using this entrance, and we're gonna, right now, you see this dotted line here represents the building. It's right on the property line. We'll be having an entrance to this parking lot off of Kirk Street, and then one off of the alley up at Kearns right here, and then the other one next down to Ambassador Laundry to try to free up congestion up there.
Good.
Mhm,
And
good.
we'll be
It's very
planting all trees all the way down the
dangerous.
street there.
Mhm.
That's good.
From East State Street, or West State Street on.
Are there any existing, I know there've been plantings in that
Yeah,
area,
well,
but I
I'm
can't
leaving that
remember.
planting bed in there, but I don't think there's anything worth saving.
Okay. I
No
couldn't remember
trees.
if there was like
There's
a,
power
rose
poles and stuff
bushes.
there. I
Yeah,
know
we-
that's a
There's
problem.
been some
We've got to
rose
be careful
bushes.
with
okay,
the-
but there weren't any small
Yeah.
trees.
No.
So if we find, if there are cables, if the high voltage cables are going to get in the way, then what we'd recommend is 2 medium-sized trees, some, you know, these hawthorns or crab apples, something
Medium.
like that.
Or-
And plant them
Hedge-
out
is
2
hedge
for
maple,
1 with
would
a
that
15-foot
qualify?
spacing
Is
rather
it
than
too, does
30-foot
it get too
spacing.
tall?
Yeah, that's the under the power line
Yeah.
tree.
That
That's
would
the
be
under
too
the power
large,
lines.
but I think there's some.
Okay, 2 for 1.
Either they get trimmed sometime when they're older. Then they look
It's
great.
better if they just plant small trees now. Sweet bay magnolias are the one.
Oh, yeah, no, this is maybe your magnolia chance.
What are you saying about the Sweet Bay
I
Magnolia?
was saying it's an
Under the-
alternative as a medium tree to put underneath the power lines.
Can they handle this type of area? Because this is going to be concrete on this side, concrete on this side, and it's a retaining wall, so this is actually extended up.
They do it
Yeah,
at
it's
the
pretty
university,
wide, though.
tolerate all sorts of.
Okay.
Retaining wall stops there and there.
Okay.
And what
There's a
about
sidewalk right there.
salt water from the winter salting? I can't remember
There are some on,
if it's raised.
what is it, Congress, I think, is one that have survived.
Mhm.
It's true.
They're just there as an alternative.
Yeah.
You want suggestions, presumably, for large shade trees, don't you?
You know, I'll come back with a plan, but if
Okay.
you have any ideas right now.
Make it easier, yeah.
Yes,
I mean,
so,
it seems to
Well-
be, it seems to be conforming.
You could use some more of the oaks and maples.
Oaks and I'd like to
And-
keep it all looking like one thing here.
yeah. Why don't you
You'd like
continue?
a mixture.
It would be
Well, I
better.
mean, oaks and maples, I'm saying, but
Yeah.
make it have some continuity with the whole project.
Yes.
so.
And
Oh,
you've
yeah,
got
But
something else
maybe-
too, cupolas and,
Yeah, it's a continuation of the red sunset, red maple, and the scarlet oak, and the
Okay,
tupelo.
I'll
Is
just
that,
use those again.
Is that not enough variety?
did you have another thought on that? What were you gonna say?
Well, I thought perhaps some linden also.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, those are
Uh,
tough.
The thornless honey locust is a tough tree. I'm not sure it's quite as nice as some of the others you have there.
Okay.
Yeah, he's chosen nicer stuff
Yeah.
than, we often see less nice stuff. So we look forward to seeing that and
This will
a
come
more
back more
formal.
refined. Yeah, I just finished this just for
Mhm.
parking, basically,
Mm.
at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, I see the date, 6/12, so 2 days old
Are there any other
Oh,
comments
good.
about this?
Things are looking good.
Okay.
Now, just before I leave here, Steve asked me to just mention that we're also working on that Pitcher Creek project. And we didn't
Yes.
bring a plan here. But I think we'll be, we will perform with everything down there as well.
We look forward to seeing the plan.
So there won't be any big parking lots, it's going to be lots of little ones all around it.
Oh,
So it'll be a difference.
did we look at some plans for it or?
No.
There was something else
We've
on.
developed a site plan, but right now they're still in the process of determining, there's the concern about the fill and the cost of fill and whether we get 2 stories or 1 story, so there's really not a site plan that's been developed 100% at this point. in time.
Where-
They're still
where
doing
is
some
this
cost
now?
studies.
Columbus Road behind where Sprague's office is. near
Oh, okay.
Parfit's.
On Parfait,
Yeah.
back in that area there.
How high up? I mean, how much is it gonna be raised? Is it gonna be raised to the 100-year flood
Plus
that
one.
comes every 3 or 4 years, or are we gonna go up higher than
That's
that?
one,
How much dirt do you have to move?
a lot of dirt,
But the,
14 foot of fill.
So where are they going to get it?
I just tell them
Oh, okay, but
we were in Amesville for a tree commission meeting, and Frank Hare met with us and was telling us about Amesville that had the 100-year flood 3 times in 10 years or something.
Well, but see,
No,
that's a
no.
different deal. Yeah.
They had a
If you
100-year
drive out
and
to
a
Amesville,
500.
you saw where the water went the last time. It was truly unusual.
yeah,
That
that
was-
that restaurant on the corner there has 2 marks for 2 of them within
Yeah, well,
18 months of each other.
I worked on that restaurant. I told that fella, this is before the county had a flood control plan. I said, you're building in a floodway.
Mhm.
He said, I don't care.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to
Said a
look
little
at it
bit
though.
different since then.
Right.
Yeah. You don't realize those creeks can come up. I mean, they look like
Well,
little benign
you drive down
creeks.
there after that happened, and there was limbs
Oh,
and
yeah.
power lines 12 feet above the road.
There was grass hanging from the power lines.
Yeah, but we're gonna have these very unusual events far more frequently.
They're flash flood things, and that happens all around. It
Mhm.
might not happen again for a while, but you're right, it could happen.
You know,
next
and the
week.
more these wetlands are filled in, the fewer sponges we have to absorb
Great.
them, and the more we can look forward to flooding. Get your brass plaques out.
Be ready for our 12th of July
No,
meeting?
I doubt if it will. I don't know if, we've got a basic layout plan that we've developed, but we're, like I said, they're contemplating options in terms of which direction to go up or out because of the amount of fill.
Mm.
That's all right. It's just the, you know, our next
Yeah.
meeting's.
I don't know
Yeah.
if it'll be ready for any kind of review. We just got a preliminary plan that, and usually we get our drawings a lot more completed before we bring them here.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Valencourt.
You're welcome.
Right.
All right, well, that means we only really have one other big plan to look at, and that is the Holzer Clinic.
Is that this one here?
And
Oh, that's what I was thinking
yes, that's a biggie. There, I might say in passing that
Oh, we don't need
Might not we need to open
we may not need to open that, actually, since we chewed on it
quite well.
in committee.
Okay.
this with this earlier version of the plan.
That's good.
Yeah, it's not quite accurate. Well, so the Holzer Clinic, we had some suggestions. Let's see.
You want to give me those
Yes,
suggestions?
and I'm going to, people who were in attendance at this meeting should let me know if I've missed anything. But our first concern was that the parking lot island configurations be checked with Chief Troxel, and apparently that review has taken place for the Holzer Clinic interior parking lot islands.
Great.
And there was an interior parking space on the northeast that needs trees at both ends, and we can indicate that on the plan here if you would like us to draw on it. There were all around the east, south, and east-west and south edge of the property, the perimeters need a shade tree every 30 feet. There just aren't shade trees.
Where's
And
that one?
so here is,
This one here, I think we're talking
let's see, here, I think, wasn't it?
the northeast ones?
It's that one there, but it's the concern.
Yeah, here's
It's
the,
whether there's enough space there for
That was for the fire engineer.
and the concern about interior parking on the northeast needs trees at both ends. Perhaps that's here
Yeah.
And here,
and
maybe,
here.
yeah.
They're just empty islands at this point, I think.
We
So-
should get red pens for this.
Yes. See, they have on their northern perimeter a really very handsome planting planned of trees and shrubs.
Mhm.
And, let's see, I've forgotten what the
This is
main
the
tree
old,
is.
this is the original.
Yeah, but I think that's still the same.
What are there, 14
Yes,
red maples, is that it?
What's it say here, yeah? Is that
Yes.
Yes.
No, he's saying that's something else. These
Oh.
are them.
That's the American,
Yeah.
that's the redbud, I think.
Right.
Okay.
No,
And-
Amelanchier, that's it.
So they've got serviceberry
Those,
alternating with silk.
Acer rubrum is the
Ivory
one there.
silk tree lilac also.
Yeah.
So there's 14 red maples and 14 serviceberries and 14 lilac ivory silk.
Which we thought was a good, nice choice.
And
Yeah.
they're in doublets between the
Yeah.
maples.
So they're doubling shrubs in between these red maples. It'll really be very handsome on the East State Street side, but
On the, all the other perimeters, we need more trees.
yeah, they all the way around, east, west, and south, they need a shade tree every 30 feet.
Do they get any credit for these? So is it?
Well, they could be
is it-
alternates, I mean, they.
Right, okay.
Yes, they do get.
Okay,
credit,
they
yeah.
get, so
Yeah.
they need to
But
have
we need
them
trees every 30 feet.
Right, but we
Yeah.
need them in between, basically.
Right,
Yeah.
so they're
Oh,
going
yeah.
to be.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be pairs of trees, or two
Mhm.
trees in between each
Right,
one of those.
right.
so.
If I remember, we were also talking about this area here having a stretch of what, 13 or how many? I forget
Yeah,
how
oh
many.
yeah, there's a stretch.
Was it
here
this one?
of-
I think.
It looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. But it's 13 spaces,
Hmm.
so technically it's too long.
Okay.
So, no, what about
But
the
it-
fire truck? There was one area we were concerned
We're
about.
concerned
fire
about
trucks.
there,
Oh, right, that, because it's so close,
but if
so.
the chief's already looked at it, then, I mean, he's
Right,
happy, that's
okay.
fine.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Actually, if anything, you'd probably pull closer to the building and through this side rather than that side, I think. I'm just guessing now.
Let's see, and the other item was that against the building, right around the building, there were 4 Cleveland Select pear, and those are really rather small.
Yeah.
Which ones
So
are
that,
those?
we would recommend that they
Replace those with,
replace them.
actually, it says there's 10 on this drawing.
Again, this is an older drawing,
Yeah,
though.
on They
Yeah.
changed the numbers.
They may have done. But where they have Cleveland Select, why do I want to do that? There should be larger trees than pears. And see, the courtyard may or may not be something in our purview, but it was a very, very interesting thing that they were doing.
Yeah.
And we had some observations that they might want to consider, that the paper bark maple might be kind of iffy in our climate zone. And the star magnolia blossoms get frosted here about half the time in the spring, if not more, and that river birch might be a better choice. It's also possible the courtyard area is a bit more protected, so that might some of these might work with some protection, but we've got our doubts.
All in all, you were of the opinion this was a good plan, though. I mean, in terms of
And
details.
especially the presentation on East State Street, that's
Yes.
really going to
Yes.
be handsome.
So the major problem was just not enough trees
Yeah, but
around.
the perimeter all around,
Right.
around over here needs to have trees every 30 feet,
Right.
including this side of this road.
So do we have any suggestions for species, or do we just want to wait and let them
Let
come back?
them decide. I mean, they seem to have chosen some pretty decent ones, I think.
Yeah, they're getting good advice
Yeah.
on landscape
Yeah.
architecture front.
I mean, they've got lindens, oaks, honey locust, maple in this
Oh,
whole collection
nice
already.
mix,
So it's-
right.
Is this up against a steep incline, or
No,
why
no,
didn't
no,
they
it's
put
flat.
anything on?
That's why we're saying that they need to put
Yeah,
trees
it's
along
just
here.
curious. There's none.
Well, it's nice and open towards the river, but
Yeah.
of course this is the south side, so they benefit from putting large shade trees here to get some shade.
Now,
Or
if
we,
they're,
go ahead.
excuse me,
No, go ahead.
if they're concerned about high water level, because it's in the, what is sort of a wetland area, they could put in sycamores for another
Yeah.
thought, because those are pretty
Yes.
tolerant of wet conditions. And river birch is another excellent choice, because it grows along the river.
Yes.
But they don't get really very large. do
What?
They don't get very large.
They
do
can get quite large.
Really?
They can, right. Because when I was teaching the tree course, I couldn't get a sample. I had to get special equipment to
Ah.
get a sample from the tree. And it was pretty, but people put them in groups in their front yard. But I've seen them get bigger and bigger. It may be a slow growing.
Anything else? I think that's it for
okay.
Holter Clinic, unless, Paul, you've got something to
Well, I
say.
just wonder, is it possible leaving this open for a Riverview? I mean, eventually it's going to go out to the floodway, and then you're going to be able to look out that way. I'm trying to remember what the window structure
Certainly
is
want to have trees over here and over here.
by the
Yeah,
parking
by
lot.
the
right?
pavement.
That may be something that they're going to have to come back and ask us about. I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
But strictly, there should be trees all the way along here.
If that's their property, they're all the way back.
It
Again,
does, because I believe we know that the property line goes all the way to the river,
Okay.
and that there are 3 properties.
Mhm.
I'm looking at Steve because I think that's yeah,
Okay.
okay. Yeah, so the river the property goes all the way to the river.
Okay.
Are there any other comments on the Holter Clinic?
No.
Okay. The other one is Beaumont Green, and we saw the collection of plans they had. There was no landscape plan in the collection of plans, so we look forward to their submitting a landscape plan. Yes,
Certainly.
please. Please, sorry.
When you go to your ordinance revision session, I'll give you one example that happened tonight. And that is, the landscape ordinance talks about if you have 6 or more units in like an apartment building, you present a landscaping plan. I'd recommend that language be revised to say that the submitter will appear, before the tree commission, because I think a lot of times what's happening is we're trying to get this program up and running. Sometimes we lose something in the translation if there's not a representative here. So if it definitely said that for like a landmark plan, a representative must present. because there's a lot that can be lost in translation. As a matter of fact, I'd invited Mr. Valentor to come tonight, just because of that. It's a lot easier if you're in direct contact with them than for us to try to work through letters or other kinds of
And that is
conversations.
the procedure that the Board of Zoning Appeals
Right.
has, isn't it?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, in their policies and procedures, it says that either you or your representative or agent must appear. If you don't, your case isn't heard.
Yeah. So we should just borrow
So-
that language. Yeah,
And most of the
thank
time, they do a continuance, but in this case, most of these people want to move
Right.
along with their development.
Another example, too, let's just carry that idea over to Holzer also. I guess what I'm getting a feeling for is a Holzer representative should be here. And, see what I'm saying, unless I know that for sure, because right now, all it says is you submit a plan.
you. Yeah, it's true.
I think that would make it a little more simple, especially for developers, so they know that, hey, your tree plan is not going to be considered unless you're there.
Yes, yes. And it would it would certainly address problems like those that we are presently having with Taco Bell not yet having submitted a corrected
Right.
plan, and Bennigan's hasn't completed landscaping in the parking lot, and the erosion out front continues to become more dramatic.
Require more work.
Yeah, I
Also-
would imagine it's even discouraging people from going to Bennigan's. They must think, ooh.
Steve, I know Debbie Phillips is talking about trying to revamp a site review ordinance or procedure. Would this be part of the site review plans that she's talking about? Could we fit in?
Related to the two issues I just brought up, or the two concerns, and two more I'll bring up after answering the question. Yes, council's considering a thing called a site plan review process. It will be administered by the Planning Commission. It will apply to all projects other than single-family home construction and duplex home construction. So if you have 3 or more units in a building, any apartment building or any other type development, will have to be approved by the Planning Commission. Right now, the draft that I saw sets out essentially a permitting hierarchy. What permit do you go get first and second and third and fourth? So for example, you could have permits required under Title V utilities, Title IX opening permits, access to the street, Title 21 subdivision, Title 23 zoning, Title 25 special flood hazard development, Title 27 land development, Title 37 landscaping, the new Title 41, and there's lots of permits. Somehow or other, the code office, responsible only for Title 23, has become the giant repository. At first, I didn't really think that it might be necessary, but as more time goes by, I think it's more critical that the city get a planner, to have a planner to coordinate these things. The burden with the council's proposed new site plan review process will be on the Planning Commission. So the Planning Commission right now is identified as the agency that will coordinate. I think, though, essentially what will happen is it'll work the same way that it does now with the administrative site plan review process that we go through. As an example, I knew that the council consideration was coming up, and that's why I had copied the Tree Commission on a send-out email to all departments that I had these plans, because administratively, we tell everybody, come in, fire chief, come in and look at your items, Nick Carr, water and sewer, come in. So that's a process we go through right now, but it still doesn't have, we know all the permits that are necessary, but some happen at different times. Some are very easy to issue, some take a lot more time. So council's considering something that's a little more structured and a little more formal for just about every development project that will happen. That's where, for example, I'll go back to Beaumont Green. That email had just gone out to say that I had a submittal from Beaumont Green. Everybody should come in and look at it. So it was just a submittal for a use permit, and there were PTIs, permits to install for water and sewer also. So not a whole lot for the fire chief to look at. You know, a lot of different things. No architectural plans submitted, that kind of thing. But the general call just went out. I have something, please come in and look at it and help me with things that should go out in a correction letter, which is the case with Taco Bell and Bennigan's too. There's extensive correction letter going out for, and landscaping will be one of those concerns that's yet to be addressed. So, for that. Related to that too, Ms. McWilliams and I met on the street, ran into each other Thursday,
Friday, maybe?
right, yeah. And I said, hey, I've got these plans at the office. We thought we were going to meet over there, and I got delayed. Next thing you know, all the plans
I took them.
were at your house. Everything, architecturals, site civil, everything.
Right, it was hard sorting through.
Yeah. Except the very small packet for Hickory Creek. So,
It's too
for example,
small.
yeah, you
It
just
wasn't
didn't
worth
see it because it wasn't a big roll. It was just a little. So there is at the office a general site plan showing plantings. And Mr. Valentour, that's why I'm glad he's going to come back. He knew to come tonight and present. I told him to on behalf of Hickory Creek, because basically what I have is just that same type drawing: a building footprint, a parking lot, identification of trees. No schedule. Don't know what the trees are. You know, that kind of thing. I think it will be much better, even if the site plan review process council's proposing wouldn't happen, it would still benefit the administration if, for example, the landscape ordinance were written to very specifically, you know, say, here's what you submit, here are the forms that you submit it on, here's who you submit it to, here's how you appear. Because right now, it's just, here are the requirements. And there's really not much description on process. I know a lot of people are concerned, and I've read a lot about how confusing it is for developers to come to town and know exactly what to do. Basically, when they come to my office, all those titles that I mentioned, I copy them and hand them to them. And anyone that has an application form, I give them the application form also. But for example, in the case of landscaping, I just say, here are the requirements, submit something that meets these. Most often, you don't get something that meets the requirements or requires a consolidation. So, sorry to get so windy about that, but
It's frustrating for
it's a
everybody.
very important part, and I know the tree commission is very concerned about that too, because usually when people come in, they go, we appreciate the advice. You know what I'm saying? I think they really do want to come in, but lacking a process to say, for sure, come tonight with your plan by coming to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Be ready to respond, answer questions, because a lot of times, I'm kind of in a quandary about such things as even given, for example, the Bob's landscaping. I got it. What could I say about it? It's a parking lot and some trees. So I'm glad Mr. Valentour was here, and he did that when I spoke to him just a couple days ago. So that worked out. Out-of-town developers, see, it's going to be a little bit different. I'm in touch with RVC and Panich and Knoll and those kinds of firms all the time, where these other people aren't necessarily just as easy to get a hold of. So I'm sure everyone would appreciate that, even developers, if it was very specific. So just a recommendation when you look at your ordinance revisions. And just so you know, too, in the draft of the council has for the site plan review process, Tree Commission and Disabilities Commission have trumped all other permits. The way it's set up right now, the very first thing you do with a proposal that requires site plan review by the Planning Commission, you have to have your Disabilities Commission review first, or it says disabilities and trees come first. Before use, before parking, before lighting, before land development, before special flood hazard. Now, it doesn't specifically list all of those out, and I'm working with the clerk of council right now to kind of tune that hierarchy up and insert the appropriate code reference sections. So that's kind of a work in progress, but it's going to happen.
What's going to happen if somebody later in the sequence wants to change something that then affects the Disabilities Commission or the Tree Commission?
I'm not sure I mean, I suppose that's a good observation, that
Well,
might be
the fire chief,
incorporated.
for instance, could say, you can't have the parking lot configured that way, it's going to be done this way, and that impacts on the trees.
I think that's good input for council as they go through the drafting of this, so that they know, in case you can't specifically do it in this order, what's the preferred order, or how do you modify the order, that those come in. This is also going to take some revision to other parts of the code, I believe, too, because lots of these boards and commissions only meet when necessary or monthly. Right now, as a zoning administrator, my hands are a little tied for the consideration of issuance of building or use permits, because the code specifically says if a permit is not approved or denied within 30 days, in other words, either you approve it or you note the deficiencies, it's automatically approved. No other ordinance says that. So my hands are a little tied as it comes to zoning permit applications, where the site plan review process that the city has right now, and I think the one that council proposes, is going to have a little more latitude than 30 days to get to all these boards and commissions and committees. And then that all, for example, will have to be presented to the planning commission. I can see site plan review taking 90 days myself. So, but for right now, we work with what we have available. So I'm sure council would appreciate any input on that too.
Thank
So
you.
I'd let you know. The way it looks right now, tree commission, first permit you have to get.
Now, if we could only
First
get
review.
trees to trump parking spaces.
Well, that could be something too. For example, if the tree commission says,
done that.
here's what we want to see, and what happens is they can't meet the parking requirement then, that would be a bit of information that they would have to take to the Board of Zoning Appeals with them to say, you know what, the tree commission thinks trees trump parking. So we like trees, you like parking. Can we meet in the middle somewhere? I'll give you an example. Beaumont Green is going to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals because they don't have enough parking. So when you finally do see their landscape plan, it will be on an area where they have actually gone to the zoning board to ask for a variance from the parking requirement. Associated with Beaumont Green, too, is they can expand their parking area, but what they would have to do would be to obtain nationwide permits to fill wetlands areas from the Army Corps of Engineers. So they can meet the parking requirement, but they'll get a federal permit to fill wetlands to do it. So every project has, each one of them has a little different angle to it.
Part of the acceptance of that Beaumont part was we were looking at the wetlands, and actually, that's it, we stepped out of our council authority to say, okay, let's try keeping this because it's up to the zoning board of appeals to make that decision. When you get down to it, right? I mean, the acceptance is, we like it, leave the wetlands, but, short the parking as a result. And we're really not capable of doing that easily.
So part of that council review or the approval for annexation, which included the necessity for them to go to the zoning board for a parking variance, should include probably some comment from council that they're in favor of granting the variance.
I believe that was in the minutes at that point.
Yeah. So the approval ordinance for Beaumont Green simply said that they would comply with all city ordinances prior to annexation. So what we're talking about there is a specific application, ask for a parking variance. That's just one of many. And when you have annexations involved too, like Beaumont Green and like Holzer, you got another layer
Yeah.
of review taking place. So these things just, they can't happen in 30 days. It's not enough time. So some of that, I think, should be addressed in the council consideration of the site plan review, and the zoning code, I think, needs to be modified to coincide with that.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a big project,
I know, it's not a simple thing to do.
and I think it does need one point of focus, one coordinator, which I hope will be a city planner. It's much more now almost than existing staff can
Part of
put
that
together.
site plan review came out of the comprehensive plan. I mean, what the template we're looking at is part of the comprehensive plan that was put there. It was suggested by Paul Grameyer to have something of this nature in place. But the assumption at that time is that we'd also have a planner to do some of this as well. And that's both assumptions, right?
Another example is the McDonald's down on Richland. They had to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a substitution of a nonconforming use. They had to come to the Tree Commission for consolidation approval. I worked extensively with them for differences of opinion we had on interpreting these special flood hazard area development requirements, and they finally saw it my way, which was probably good. There were some issues that also had to do with staying out of Coates Run. There were Title IX opening permits where the Service Safety Director had to look at access with recommendation from the Street Director, and that all had to be crunched into 30 days. And that was just one building on one relatively small lot. These other projects are,
And realize most of the developer would like to see it in 30 days or less at that point, right? I mean, they want to move.
well, they like to see it as quick as possible.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'll give you an example, though. I'm sorry to go on so long, but
She can cut you off.
That's true.
one last thing as an example, and then I'll quit.
Yeah, wait, I've got a ruler here.
When you submit plans to the state of Ohio for building only, and you got to realize, like for Landmark, you can submit and you can get what's called a footer foundation only permit. In other words, they'll approve it so you can get started under construction, but they haven't approved the whole building. So they'll kind of give you an early, go ahead and break ground, and you got to submit along the way. That can take, a long period of time. In some cases, projects have to be what they call fast-tracked. The complete design hasn't taken place, but the design for the initial installation of footers, foundation, utilities can occur. So the state does these partial permits, and especially when developers and architects get that approval from the state, they take that as a big green light to go. And if the particular jurisdiction they're in has multiple other permits, they just really have in their minds, hey, I've got a state permit, I'm moving. And obviously in Athens, it doesn't happen that fast, and it's probably going to take a little longer. So
Good.
if it means good planning, then I think that's great.
Yes. Well,
If
thank
they
you.
know if they know the rules up front too.
Thank you.
So thanks for letting me go on about that. but
That's okay.
Yeah, it's a
It
worthwhile
is a
one.
busy,
It's
busy
education.
time.
Yes, it's just, I can, and I'm sorry I absconded with all the plans. I think somebody got a nice weekend out of that. Well, the next item of business, I don't think we will even address, the landscape ordinance revision sessions. Yes, thank you very much. We have 2 sessions scheduled, and we may need more. It's conceivable we might even really want to try to squeeze one in June. Do we want to? Or is it,
Wouldn't work for me.
no? Okay.
We could have a rump session.
Yeah. Well, then let's start with the July 15th, and we can start increasing in number if it looks like it's not going to make it. So Sunday, July 15, it'll be the meetings on the deck. And yes, at 7. And Sunday, August 12, likewise. So if we need something in between those 2 points in order to get things to City Council by September, we'll do so. But if you would, please put that on your calendars. And then the Emerald Ash Borer, we don't have Ron here nor Ann, so we'll just skip that until they return. And the Shade Tree Commission webpage, we have our intern who has sat through all this. Taking. Yes, right. So we will start working again. Anita's been working on it before, but she's
back.
She's back. Yeah, the term is over, the summer begins. So let's see, you were working mostly with David at the end, weren't you?
Yeah, and I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, where we left it is, I really need to get with, and I came early today to do this, but it was get with Ron and talk about logistics, how it's going to happen. And I know that I've looked, and I tried to look again today, but couldn't get on the city website today. But there is a page that has some information outlined, and so what I need to find out from him is how we link
Yeah, we've got
from
a number.
there, and
There's a number of procedural issues. The first one is how do we, or where do we load these pages
Yeah.
initially? And then once they've been loaded, who is going to be able to make changes, corrections, add the minutes to meetings, agendas, and all the rest of it? Because we need something that's going to be responsive enough that, you know, we can get an agenda up a few
Mhm.
days before the meeting, and maybe the minutes up a week afterwards, and things like that. So
And I've compiled the notes from our past meetings about
Mm-hmm.
what's important to people on what should be on that front page. So I have that, but it's kind of premature at this point. We need to figure out how we're going to get it.
Because the other thing is there may be controls over what the city wants to have in terms of initial presentation. Hopefully, once we get past the first page, we can decide, or you can decide
Right.
exactly what happens.
Yeah, so I need to find all of that out. And I
So-
know we tossed around the idea of one point of having somebody else host it, and I did a little bit of research, and I have some pages on that. But what I'm hoping is that this all works out with the city, and we can do it that way.
Okay. For prototype stuff, would you be talking about trying to host it off the city website or something, or off the city system?
That's what I don't know. And I don't know what we're allowed to do, because some of the information is, I don't know, I want to say confidential, but there is, no.
No, it's all
No.
supposed to be public.
It's all public.
Okay. I
Yep.
thought somebody, Scott or Ron, had told me that they have to have some of it on the website because they need control of it.
Mm.
So I need to clear that up.
Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's those procedures that we have to get straight.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to meet with Ron sometime on that?
Yes.
Okay. I think what I hear about the website stuff most of the time has to do with if we have a set of laws up there.
Mhm.
I know that the law director has control of the city code, with the idea that somebody can't go in and modify it if it says it.
That's a lovely idea.
It's not interactive code.
Well, actually, there's a disclaimer saying it's not accurate, and you have to accept the fact that this is just the, a web version of it, but the fact is you don't want things like that to happen. So that could actually see being a problem. Most of the other stuff we're trying to put out as a tree commission, I suspect, is pretty benign.
Raw
Yeah, it's-
information.
yeah.
that's what it is.
Right, information.
Right, how to prune a tree, how to mulch a tree. Be careful about that nasty bamboo.
Things like
And
that.
suggestions to developers, maybe
Yes, it-
rules.
Yeah.
And actually, I'd made note before Steve had gotten up there that maybe there's a packet, or maybe we obviously want to be able to access that online on
Mhm.
how do I present to the
Yeah.
tree commission.
It would be nice.
Here are the 5 things you need to do, and
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
this is how you do it.
One
instead of just-
way to go forward might be, as well as obviously trying to get Ron and get that sorted out, but the other way to go forward might be to try and put forward a sort of storyboard type pattern almost as to how you see the structure.
That's what I was
That'd be
trying to
great.
start to do by compiling all of those different
Mhm.
handwritten notes.
Mhm.
And so I did kind of start doing a hierarchy, and I would want approval from everybody, because this is, of course, from what I remember.
Yeah.
everything. No, this is important. So we'll get that straightened away too, and I don't think that has to wait. I mean, we can
Yes,
work on
that's
that
right. We should get on
simultaneously.
with it.
So I'll take what I've done and maybe formalize it a little, and I can send it out at the same time, so I'm waiting.
So you can send it as like a web page or something like that, maybe?
Say that again.
Send it out as a web page, so to speak, as a
Um,
HTML.
Okay.
Is that what you're thinking of?
That
Or- no,
wasn't
that's-
what I was thinking of.
Oh, well, what were you thinking of?
I was thinking of starting with just a hierarchy.
Okay.
In just type
Priorities.
out priorities. Let's get some priorities straight before I spend a lot of time on
Okay.
a lot of other stuff. And then once we have those priorities straight.
Do you think you'll have something before July 12th?
Oh yeah, that's my plan.
'Cause
I don't
we
want to
could-
wait
mean,
till July 12th
No,
to.
what I was going to suggest was we could have just a short meeting
Yeah, sure.
on the webpage.
Yes.
At your house.
Yeah.
Between now and July
Yeah, just
12th.
have that be the
At your
subject.
house, too.
We have really
Back on the
agreeable
deck again.
conditions. Yes,
Okay.
that would be good.
Do you want to
Set the date now.
Date now?
Let us, Sundays at 7 have so far worked. Is that,
Fine by me.
okay?
How's soon.
Let's see, and you want
Give
to
me
try
at
something in
least
about 2
2
weeks?
weeks.
Okay,
Okay.
so 2 weeks from now?
So that would, well, it'd
What-
probably be better to do it than after July 4th, wouldn't it?
Oh, indeed, yeah.
That's going to get close.
It's getting close to July 14th.
Well, although, that's okay.
July 8th. Isn't that
The
a
Sunday,
Sunday?
July 8th at 7 PM, does that?
Unless we do it on the one before that. That's the
July
Wednesday.
1st.
You look like you're questioning that.
That wouldn't be a terribly good time for me. We're returning from vacation that day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I won't be in town.
But
So plus 2.
probably would be back
For the 8th?
by the middle of the day on the 1st, and it certainly would be here on the 8th.
Wow.
So is our tree commission going to be, is our meeting going to be on the second
No,
Thursday?
Sunday- July.
Yes,
On the
Of
12th
July?
of July.
July
Aha.
12th. Yeah, down here at the bottom. Thursday,
Do I
Thursday, July
sense a
12th.
pattern forming here?
Well, it was because of the 4th of July, we had to
Yeah.
boot to the following week.
Okay,
Yes, there is a pattern there.
but a temporary.
So Sunday, July 8th, 7 PM. Okay, very good. And thank you, Anita, for sitting through the whole thing.
My pleasure. It's actually very interesting.
They're always, it's neat to see building things in particular. Well, so is there any other comment for Anita? There's one thing just occurred to me that might be nifty to have on available on a website, or I don't know if it's even physically possible, but it would be perhaps useful to a developer, particularly smaller ones, to have an example of a successful plan that they could just see. You know, if it were possible to have the Holzer Clinic plan, if in its final version, you know, with all the approval, so they could see that this is a site plan that worked. These are the trees. This is the planning schedule. This was a successful plan. The tree commission approved, and maybe then have a small version, you know, some parking lot that was successful, that's under 7,000 square feet. So we could have maybe 3 kinds of examples: something really big, something medium-sized, something small, so that there's. I get the feeling that people sometimes submit plans as if they had no idea what would work, and just seeing something that does work is helpful.
One of the problems that could occur with that is I suspect some of these architectural plans are owned by either the developer or the architect.
But these are public documents now, aren't they,
Are
since
they?
they've been submitted? Oh, dear.
Yeah, I believe so.
We need
I
Gary's
think
We can use
the,
that? Okay.
there may be some restrictions on reproduction. I'm not sure. You may need their permission. When you really get in trouble is when you take their plans and duplicate them somewhere else, and they're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
They belong to somebody. There's an
Yeah,
owner
okay.
of them.
We
But they might feel
There's
honored.
permission.
I would assume we would ask
That's
permission
permission.
before we put them.
Right.
That's
Right,
true.
and that
We
would be, I think
honor
that'd be a
them.
good
Yeah, I
relation.
can say, you know,
It's a good relationship you could build with the local architectural firm too, because, you know, you
Yeah.
might say down in the bottom, project by
Right.
so-and-so architect.
advertisement.
That's right. Yeah, it could be the
By local.
ideal
I have
plan.
no
Thank
problem
you.
with something like that, yes.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, thank you for common sense.
But it's a not good idea, though. It is.
Can I say one more thing, though?
Yes.
Remembering back to one of the last times we met, when I presented several websites
Mhm.
from other towns, shade tree commissions, and I was going to get feedback.
And we didn't do it.
And
And
I
we
didn't
didn't get any
feedback. Now, it's not crucial,
It would be
but
helpful.
it would be helpful, yes, to have some feedback. And if you need me to send those links out again, I
Can you do that?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I have them, but why not
I
refresh
will
us?
be happy to do that. Yeah, and so
I
maybe.
did check some of them out, but it's been so long now.
It's
It's
been a
time
while.
to send it
I forgot.
again.
Okay, so I will send you an email.
I
Thank
remember
you.
some of them very
Do our
nice,
homework.
so that's good to look at.
Yes. Wow. Is there anything else, Steve?
Related to creation of a web page, I had a couple ideas that I was thinking about. Because of this, a site plan review process in one form or another is going to happen.
Okay.
And it would be very nice if, say, at the city website, do I need site plan review? go to a page, yes. And then there's all of these links, land development, all the different titles. The tree commission could have a website up and running that fit perfectly with that site plan review process, and maybe be the first board, commission, whatever, to have something that was really going to fit in with this review process. I can imagine even at the tree commission site, you're going to have like homeowners. Homeowners have different interests
Yeah, and
than commercial maintenance, than new development. So you could almost have homeowners only, maintenance only, developers only. You put the only there, everybody's going to want to go look at it too,
Yeah, that too.
if they can get into it. And all of those, as these are set up, I can envision finally too, on the web page, just all of these links where you just click and go right to it. As Paul mentioned, one of the problems right now is to actually get to the city code, there's no really direct way to get there or to find it. And a lot of times, I've been working with a development company from Georgia and one from Connecticut, actually one from Columbus also. And they said, well, you got a really nice web page, I just can't find my way to what I want. And in about 30 seconds, I take them right to where it is they need to go. It's there, but
It's not obvious.
yeah, it's not, so.
Yeah.
I mean, this would be a great first piece to that puzzle.
What I
And again, it's
see-
like everything else, who's going to be the who's going to put all that together? Is it going to be Ron Forrest or Ilgard, or, who's it going to be that keeps this whole thing together and updated? Right now, I don't know if you submit your agendas to Ron and Scott right now. I do that for zoning board, planning commission does it, council does it, they run it on the government channel. As far as I know too, if they have time, they actually post it at the web link also. Probably they could do minutes if you submitted them. But they're like just about every other department.
Swamped.
You just got this big pile of
Well, that's
things to
where
do.
the tension comes in between, should it be hosted somewhere else and
Exactly.
hosted here? Because if the city can't maintain it, and one of us could maintain it at another site, then that might be a better solution.
When we were looking at websites for tree commission stuff, there were sites that were hosted outside the city system. I know when I go and look at various codes in other cities, a lot of them are actually contracted out entirely. You end up clicking on it, you end up in, it's not so much Anderson Online, but something very similar to that, where it's just a business that has 6 or 7 cities that they have clients as clients.
I've done that too when I've looked for things that have to do with other development regulations. They might have a link, you click on it and they have like a disclaimer and they say, you're now leaving the City of Boulder's website.
Yeah.
But it takes you right to where you need to go.
Yeah.
So you maintain it yourself, and they don't vouch for the information, but it's a way to distribute the workload.
I know you don't have a lot of time to look at a lot of this stuff. Why don't you send him links as well, just so he has an idea of what we're looking at as well? Why not?
Sure.
Yeah.
There's some nice ones. I mean,
Yeah.
we were pleasantly amused by some about tree toppings and other
Yeah.
things like that.
There was one very humorous one that I wrote.
Yeah, that was fun.
Anything
Some
else, Steve?
ideas.
No?
Nah, just some ideas, and I want to try to help put all this.
One of the
together.
discussions I've had with Ron is the idea of each department having somebody who's like an IT person to enter all this stuff in terms of information. Is that something that's, because usually every department has somebody who's a little, into computers enough to say, can we access that? And I know he was talking about that a while back in terms of getting software for doing that. Is that something capable of your department is?
Well, I can give you, for example, if we know how to do it, we probably could do it and
Okay.
keep the code site updated. Right now, what we do, for example, every 3 or 4 months, we'll come up with an updated rental housing list. And believe it or not, there are sometimes significant changes just in a 3 or 4 month period. New rentals, new ownership, updated information, and we just submit that to Ron, and it gets on there when it gets on there.
Yeah.
There's some other thing. Forms and applications. We might update a form. When you go to the code site, there's an applications link. You click on it, shows you all the permit applications that are available online. Something's revised, we send it up here to Ron, and it gets revised. I guess it just goes in his pile of work to do.
Yeah.
So, yes, we could, yeah, with some training and, a lot of that stuff is going to be kind of proprietary too. We don't, I mean, I'm going to be just like the law director, I suppose. This is mine. This is a code office site. Only certain people get to
Yeah, password.
get in here
protected, yeah.
and tinker with it. So, no, I think it could work, and it's something we've discussed a lot, because as the availability of information, grows, who actually, though, is the person that makes it available? It's there. How's it coordinated? How do you find it? Who updates it? Great ideas, just like most places, where do you find the money for the staffing to do it? Or who's going to get a new job assignment?
Yes, an expansion of their job.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there any other business? No? People have all their committee meeting notes? Okay, well,
So we've got the 7th, the 8th, the 12th, and 15th.
right.
Do we have enough meetings? Just a quick question.
That's true.
I know
Some
I
of
have
them-
enough.
Yes, it can become a way of life. Well, so, I declare the meeting adjourned. I don't think I'm even going to entertain any motions
here.
about that. Thank you, Anita.